Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. The war in Afghanistan is still going on, and the situation in Afghanistan, the political situation, is a bit unstable. Though there is a deal that is signed between the United States and the Taliban, but we see that the violence continues in Afghanistan. Recently, a few weeks back, there were several attacks in Kabul specifically. As I talked about the attacks in Afghanistan, Taliban have been attacking the Afghan security forces for that matter. But while there is a deal between the United States and Taliban, and there are hopes that there would be an intra-Afghan talks soon, the role of the spoilers cannot be ruled out. Spoilers have been playing their part in Afghanistan primarily to destabilize the peace process that is going on, and also to derail the intra-Afghan peace process. Few weeks back, as I said earlier, Daesh, ISIS claimed the attacks in Kabul. Two very important incidents took place in Kabul. One was the attack on the Sikh temple in Kabul. It was to target the small Sikh community that has been living in Kabul. And interestingly, the attacker of that on that Sikh shrine was a terrorist from India, and who was later his name was brought forward by the Afghan authorities as well. The second attack was on a maternity ward in Kabul. That too, interestingly, was also claimed by ISIS. But President Ghani was quick to blame it on the Taliban, and he said that the Afghan government would launch an offensive against the Taliban. Offensive goes on, it continues. The clashes, the war goes on, and it continues. While this is going on in Afghanistan, we have to remember the role that the spoilers are playing in Afghanistan. Pakistan wants peace and stability in the region. Afghan government wants peace and stability in the region. So does US and other countries in the region. But there are spoilers, as we are talking, who don't want to see the intra-Afghan talks to start. And they would be attacking, and they would be carrying out attacks here and there in Afghanistan. Recently, there was a report by United Nations, though this report, interestingly, was submitted to United Nations, and which said that still the Taliban might be having some links with the Al-Qaeda and with other terrorist organizations. Taliban have refuted it. They have denied this report. Talking about this report, India has been using this report to propagate its own propaganda against Pakistan. And as we know that they never leave any chance, they never miss any chance to blame Pakistan for what is happening inside Afghanistan. As I said, the spoilers are there, and the spoilers are very evident. All the countries in the region, they want peace and stability in Afghanistan, but there is one country that was left out from this intra-Afghan, from this Taliban and US deal, which was left out by the region, and that was India. And they feel that. And perhaps that, because of that, they have been playing the role of a spoiler. Pakistani officials have been very open about it, that India has been supporting the terrorists like TTP and Daesh in Afghanistan to carry out attacks in Pakistan. And this has been going on. Pakistan has also raised up this issue with the United Nations and with the Security Council as well. Today we are going to discuss about the Indian propaganda. We are going to discuss about how India is using the Afghan soil, how India has been funding and supporting TTP, how they have been supporting ISIS for that matter, and few factions of ISIS and other terrorist organizations in the region, in Balochistan and in Afghanistan. We are joined by our special guest on Skype, Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan, renowned senior defense analyst and former president of National Defense University. We'll be joined by other guests as well in a while, but I'll start my show with Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan. Sir, welcome to the show. We are talking about Afghanistan, and recently the Indian Ministry of External Affairs has stepped up its propaganda against Pakistan. Nothing new for Pakistan, but once again they have been blaming things on Pakistan. This anti-Pakistan sentiment that India has been promoting in Afghanistan and the terrorist organizations that they have been funding and supporting in Afghanistan, how do you see it?
Okay. First of all, let me get a state that there are at least 4 agents of chaos in Afghanistan who are acting as fathers of peace. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. They obviously include ISIS, the TPP, NDS, and yeah, India is actually probably sponsoring the activity. So it is nothing new that they are leveling these false allegations against Pakistan. Also recall what Mr. Abbas Tanikzai said, I think a few weeks back, when he was asked about the role of India in Afghanistan. So he was very categoric and he said that India has always been supporting uh, traitors. He was now referring to the Indian role when the Soviet Union had occupied Afghanistan, and then India was supporting the communists there, and they were opposing the Mujahideen there. And now, again, the present Afghan government is being supported, and within the present Afghan government, they in particular are supporting uh, the erstwhile Northern Alliance. So it is very clear that they will continue to play this negative role. They've been doing that in the past, and they'll continue to do it again also. Uh, Again, the important thing for us to remember is that a lot has changed. The world has changed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the international economies across the globe, they are in a state of depression,
Sorry to interrupt
and
you.
they
Sorry to
are
interrupt
in
you.
no position
We'll
now.
continue. Sir, sorry to interrupt you. We'll continue our point with you on this, how India is using the Afghan soil. We are joined by Ms. Aisha Farooqi, spokesperson, Pakistan Foreign Office. Assalamu alaikum.
Ji, walaikum salam.
Ms. Farooqi, welcome to the show. As you said yesterday, Pakistan's Foreign Office, that India is involved in sponsoring and financing the terrorists in Afghanistan. How do you see the situation and this funding of the terrorist organizations by India? How do you see the situation?
As you rightly pointed out in our statement of the Foreign Office yesterday, the report by the sanctions monitoring team was unfortunately given a very misleading slant by India. And allegations were maliciously made against Pakistan. The report nowhere does it give any reference to what India was alluding to. In fact, the reality is that the report clearly supports Pakistan's position that we have been articulating to many of our international interlocutors, that India has been sponsoring terrorist organizations in Afghanistan against Pakistan and basically hindering the forward momentum of the Afghan peace process. So there are several references in that report that vindicate Pakistan's long-standing position that it is India basically that has a design to thwart the peace process there. In fact, to the effect that there are, the report has noted that an Indian national, apparently the leader of Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, was killed by international forces last year in Afghanistan. And therefore, India is basically under obligation to stop the movement of such terrorist elements to travel to Afghanistan from its soil.
Right. And recently there was a statement, Ms. Farooqi, by the representatives of Pakistan, Iran, Russia and China talking about peace and stability in Afghanistan. They also talked about the presence of TTP, ETIM and these terrorist organizations in Afghanistan, and that all these four countries demand that the Afghan soil would not be used against Pakistan or the countries in the region. How do you see this development? And India's absence from this platform is very visible. How do you see it?
Well, you see, Pakistan has had a principled position on the Afghan peace process. We have always played a role of a facilitator in order to have and enduring peace and stability in Afghanistan. There are several mechanisms through which Pakistan is playing this role of a facilitator. And what we saw on the 29th of February, the signing of agreement between the US and the Taliban, we believe, presents a historic moment in this long-running saga for peace to return to Afghanistan. So surely there are, there are elements, and Pakistan has on a number of occasions warned that there are spoilers both within Afghanistan and beyond who do not wish to see this progress taken forward.
Right. And my last question, Ms. Farooqui, recently there are reports that India has been threatening Pakistani diplomats who are posted in India, who are serving Pakistan in India. How do you see this development? And though this is not new, but how do you see this harassment and this threatening of the Pakistani diplomats in India?
Well, obviously with a lot of concern, and we have lodged a very strong protest with the Indian authorities on that. Since centuries, it must be borne in mind that diplomats and envoys are treated with certain dignity and respect, which was codified under the Vienna Convention. And all countries of the world accord that dignity and respect and protection to diplomats who are assigned in their countries. For India to violate a basic code of conduct for diplomats of Pakistan on assignment in Delhi is a matter of not only grave concern, but it's a violation of an international obligation that India is a signatory to. So naturally, this is something that we take great umbrage at, and we have expressed this concern, and we will make sure that our diplomats are protected and their safety is ensured.
Right. Ms. Farooqui, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. That was Ms. Aisha Farooqui, spokesperson Foreign Office, Pakistan Foreign Office, with us on Polcon. General Raza, you heard what Ms. Farooqui said. India's involvement in Afghanistan, their negative role in Afghanistan, and also the way they are threatening Pakistani diplomats in Delhi. This whole situation, India being left out of Afghanistan peace process, and do you think that India feels isolated at the moment in the region?
Yes, India is really isolated. I think this is separate item. Their own analysts are saying that it is definitely isolated, particularly when it relates to their position in Afghanistan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
There is some echo, but I'm glad that
I'll ask the producer to lower down the volume, and maybe then we can better hear you. Right. Okay.
Okay. So this will continue, but let me get back to what I was saying.
Right. We have, I think there's some connectivity issue with General Raza. We have Ambassador Asif Durrani with us on phone call, renowned senior diplomat and expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Ambassador Durrani, welcome to the show. We are discussing India's involvement in Afghanistan. You have served Pakistan and Afghanistan as well as in Iran. India's involvement in Afghanistan and its role of a spoiler is no secret, I would say. But the way now they have been funding, financing and supporting the terrorist organizations in Afghanistan amidst this whole intra-Afghan peace talks scenario, what do you think about its role and the negative implications of this role in Afghanistan?
From the very beginning, when this Afghanistan crisis started, right from the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, India was first with the Soviet occupation forces, and it termed those 7 Mujahideen parties alliance as terrorists. And then it was the period when in 1984, India used the opportunity to capture Siachen and it created another, serious situation between the two countries. And then subsequently, when Mujahideen they triumphed, and then they had the internecine war, they again they were siding with those parties which actually parted ways, and then came the Taliban, and they started opposing the Taliban. Once Taliban triumphed, so again Indians were on the other side of the fence. So overall, India has played a role of an opposition and a spoiler. Reason has been Pakistan, because India's policy was to create a two-front situation for Pakistan all the time. Even before Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, it was supporting the Pashtunistan bogie, so it is not something new. So Indian machinations, and I don't think that their institutional memory would any time is going to support a peaceful Afghanistan. Sometimes for Pakistan's sake, and other times, most of the time, it is Pakistan's sake that they want to create, as I said, two-front situation for Pakistan. So now in this scenario where the U.S. signed an agreement with the Taliban, now this is politics. These Americans, they term Taliban as terrorists, but now they realize that Taliban are a stakeholder. They entered into negotiations and they signed a deal. And they are now bound to remove their name from the 1988 sanction list.
Well,
yes.
India's role, Ambassador Durrani, you mentioned India's role last almost 19 years of this Afghan war that has been going on. United States at one point wanted to give India a larger role in Afghanistan. Talking about that role and India's negative impression and role in Afghanistan, do you think that India otherwise has also sort of failed in Afghanistan? They have not been able to do any substantial work for the Afghan government, for the Afghan people. Instead, they are now sponsoring and backing the terrorist organizations. Do you see it that way?
Shamil, they always look Afghanistan through the Pakistani prism. And they would customize their response accordingly. So they think that till the time India and Pakistan, they evolve a modus vivendi and they come to an understanding. This is going to be the Indian policy to keep Pakistan under pressure. And that's what they are likely to do. And here, when we say spoiler's role, it is because for us, peace is imperative in Afghanistan, very important, because it is just not Afghanistan, but the whole Central Asia is open for trade and development and progress. And then the world trend is moving towards the regional alliances. So both, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Central Asian states are part of the Economic Cooperation Organization also, in which Iran and Turkey are a part. And then Central Asian states are also now a party to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, to which Russia, China, and even India are members. And Iran is an observer. So here you have to see that India has of late, since now it is fiddling the American tune, so now they are part of the Indo-Pacific Alliance, yes, and which is meant to pressurize China. So in this respect, India is playing a role of a spoiler both in the Indo-Pacific region. It is playing the role of a spoiler in Afghanistan. And even it played the role of a spoiler in SAARC, which is why the SAARC summit could not be held in Afghanistan. In Pakistan.
Rightly said. Ambassador, please stay with us online. I'm going to put this question to General Raza. General Raza, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Talking about the scenario in Afghanistan, do you think that the Afghan government realizes the negative role that India is playing at the moment? Because to the Afghan leadership, I think the most important thing is the post-withdrawal scenario in Afghanistan. American troops are going to withdraw sooner or later from Afghanistan. It would be the regional countries that are going to stand with Afghanistan, with the Afghan government, and talk about peace and stability over there. India doesn't have any role. Do you think that Afghan government realizes this?
The Afghan government, so far has been very supportive of the Indian policies in Afghanistan, even to the degree of allowing them all their consulates in southern Afghanistan to be used for terrorist activities in Pakistan. The present rulers of Afghanistan, and I would not say all of them, but most of them, they would want that India should play a major role in Afghanistan and in whatever future dispensation is there. But this is not the reality. The reality would be that whenever there is a new dispensation, then because India has been playing the role of a spoiler in the peace process of Afghanistan, and as perceived, by the Taliban, that India has been always supporting the quote-unquote traitors. Therefore, I do not see any role for India in Afghanistan. Also, a very important reason for that is the fact that India does not share any border with Afghanistan. So I think they should be content with whatever little role they might get after, the NATO ISAF forces withdraw from Afghanistan. The major role in that scenario will definitely be played by China, by the United States, by Russia, by Pakistan, and other immediate neighbors of Afghanistan who share borders with it. Coming back to China, we are aware, that now Indian efforts since October last to change the status quo in Ladakh and in the other areas in the northeast. It is trying to embroil China, and so this also does not augur well for the peace process or the regional peace here.
This is a very interesting point, General Raza. This point is very interesting. You mentioned about Ladakh. India doesn't have good relations with Pakistan. They have their skirmishes with Pakistan on a line of control and working boundary. Well, China, Nepal, Bangladesh, even Sri Lanka for that matter. So regionally, India is picking up fights with almost all the important countries and all its neighbors. What is India's strategy, by the way, when they pick up fights with their neighbors?
Well, I think I would call it no strategy at all. And I think yesterday in some other program I was saying that at least as it relates to Pakistan, their strategy is that of some kind of circular stupidity, because they say that the problems between Pakistan and India can only be solved bilaterally, and they do not welcome any third-party mediation or arbitration, or even if it is by the United Nations. And when the third parties express their desire to come for mediation or conflict management, then it says no, we'll do it ourselves. But they are not prepared to talk to Pakistan. Similarly, when it relates to Indian relation with the other neighbors, Indian foreign policy, unfortunately, is highly militarized. And the present Indian government is using its military to address political problems, whether it is in Kashmir or whether it is with the Chinese borders, Sikkim, Nepal, Bhutan. So that is actually an absolutely wrong approach. These are political problems, and they have to be solved politically and not militarily. And the earlier they understand this, the better it would be. India must keep in mind that right now there are, major separation and independence movements going on, which have actually been given new impetus because of whatever has happened in India in the past, and I'm referring to their Citizen Amendment Bill. You saw that in the Northeast, and also when they tried to disturb the status quo in Kashmir. Right now, the previous 10 or 11 freedom movements, they actually have restarted, and I'm talking of the movement by the Sikhs, by the Dalits, Kashmiris, Assamese, the Nagas, the Mizo, the Tamils, the Tripuris, Manipuris, the Karbis, the Kamtapuris, and the Bodos. So India should actually be worried about all these movements there. We are also aware that because of the clear Islamophobia and its treatment of the other minorities, particularly the Muslims, I think there is a time now, they are now talking of a second partition of India, and the present Muslims of India in particular are now, they are now convinced that the two-nation theory in 1947 was definitely valid, and that it is now even more valid. And I think
that's a very valid point, General Raza. The internal situation and the external situation of India. I'll put this question to Ambassador Asif Durrani. Sir, internally, General Raza rightly said that if we look at Indian-occupied Kashmir, it's a mess for India. They have deployed their troops, almost 7 lakh troops in Indian-occupied Kashmir, but the resistance in Indian-occupied Kashmir goes on. They have introduced CAA, Citizen Amendmentship Act in India. Muslims have been protesting against them and against that as well. Internally, the Indian situation, Indian politics is messed up. Externally, India has failed in Afghanistan. It has picked up fight with Pakistan, with China, Nepal, Bangladesh, almost all the countries in the region. How do you see India's internal and external situation at the moment?
Well, it is getting dangerous. Internally, already they have created an environment in which minorities are at the receiving end. They are being stigmatized. There's a xenophobia going on in the entire country, and a majoritarian psyche is very much on the play, and which has resulted in a sense of alienation among the minorities, including the Muslims. And particularly the Muslims, they are the special target, because through that, and from the very beginning, the RSS has been actually making the Muslims target. In a way, they made it an issue so that they can consolidate the majority votes. And that's how they have been proceeding, and they have succeeded. Since 2014 that Mr. Modi is in power, there has been tension between the majority and the minority, and that is too is happening under the supervision of the government. Now, governments should be neutral. Governments are colorblind. They don't discriminate among their citizens. But here is the case where the government in power actually looks the other way when the RSS goons, they start, torturing or persecuting the Muslims. And this has happened in the open daylight. This has not a subtle way, which you find discrimination against the blacks in the United States. Again, a champion of democracy and human rights. So here, in a way, there is going to be a common denominator on both sides in the United States and the Indians. But on India's external policies, again, it is becoming militarized. And this is what is very dangerous. And they think that whatever they have done in India, they would succeed elsewhere and outside their borders, then they are harshly mistaken, because whatever policy they are pursuing inside the country is actually creating sense of alienation inside the country. And the people are...
Durrani, this point is very important. I'll ask you this question, and after this question, we'll take a break. India boasts about being a big economic power, but its external affairs strategy, its foreign affairs strategy is very confused, as we are talking about Afghanistan, China, Pakistan, and all the countries in the region. It boasts about being an economic power, but the foreign affairs India's foreign affairs is very confused. Do you see it that way, this confusion of foreign affairs and internal affairs? Mr. Durrani, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And it is actually the RSS Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, it is actually the policy of the RSS-led government, which is in fact pursuing the agenda, and it is internally an agenda of creating tensions, and externally it is the expansionist and design. And their action in the occupied Kashmir by abrogating Article 370 and 35A actually is formalizing their occupation. But they can do whatever they want to, but they cannot undermine the legitimacy of the dispute. They just cannot swallow it. It remains a dispute. So this is just India and Pakistan. But when you talk about Nepal, here you can see that Nepalese have been quite, they have expressed their displeasure over India's efforts to annex their territory and make it as part of their map. Again, this is very disturbing. They did that with the Sri Lankans way back, and they sent their troops there, but they had to have a humiliating retreat from there. Right. Similarly, with Bangladesh, their CAA and their NRC edicts, they are creating tensions between Bangladesh and India, because they now Indians are claiming, especially the RSS and BJP combined, that almost more than 8 to 9 million Bengalis are Bangladeshi Bengalis are in India, and they are preparing a list. So this is going to create more tensions. Right now, there is a temporary bonhomie between Mrs. Hasina Wajid and the Indian government, but this is not going to last very much. So here, India should see that it is actually writing its own doom. It is actually it is sowing the seeds of implosion inside the country. But again, we should not be happy about that, because an imploded India would have far graver implications for Pakistan as well.
Rightly said. Ambassador Durrani, rightly said. We are going to take a break, and after the break, we are going to discuss about possible regional response to Indian aggression. India's strategy in Afghanistan has failed. They have been backing the terrorist organizations in Afghanistan. India is playing the role of a spoiler in Afghanistan, and its relations with Pakistan, China, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka for that matter, aren't very pleasant. So what can be the regional response to India's aggression with all its neighbors, its expansionist designs, and this rise of saffron-dyed Hindutva mindset in India? What can be the possible regional response to this? And of course, we are going to discuss a little bit about Afghanistan's peace process in future. Stay with us.
Magla Hills, the heaven of Islamabad, the abode of God, a place where you can explore your soul and meet power of natural elegance of mountains. Spread over an area of 12,605 hectares, the Magla Range, the foothills of Himalayas, are young.
Welcome back. We are discussing India's role of a spoiler in the region. If you look at Afghanistan, India has been playing the role of a spoiler in Afghanistan by backing the terrorist organizations like TTP and ISIS, for that matter, in Afghanistan. And we are discussing that even with other countries in the region. India's role is not that of a of a country which wants to collaborate or cooperate with other countries. This economic rise of India may be there, but this economic rise is more sort of a facade, because India's foreign affairs strategy is a confused strategy, and they have been picking up fights with almost all the neighbors, and it is India actually at the moment that we see is isolated in the region. We talked about all the countries in the region which India has picked up fights with. General Raza, do you agree with this idea that there should be a regional response to India's aggression in the region? As we are discussing before the break, we discussed about all the countries that are having issue with India, or India is having issue with all these countries. What can be the possible regional response to this?
Well, you are seeing the regional response, as it relates to Pakistan and as it relates to China, as it relates to Nepal. These three countries have made their responses very clear, and it should be known, I think, to us and to the world as well. Unfortunately, the United States is supportive of the Indian stance. It supported their stance in the past, and it is supporting it now as well. It doesn't augur well for peace and stability, whether it is in Afghanistan or whether it is in the South Asian region. Nowadays, India is being called with a number of names, and it is not only, the Western media, but their own media, and they've been calling, Mr. Modi as the divider in chief, and they've been saying that will India make or wreck India? And now, because their economy is actually not going up, but it is going down, and that is actually one reason why they want, to divert the attention of this failure, divert the attention of their own people from their failure, that they are hotting up the line of control here with Pakistan and the line of actual control with China. They are also carrying out, a cartographic aggression by changing and falsifying maps on disputed territories which have been recognized by international conventions and by the United Nations. They are also creating conditions for false flag operations across the line of control for the only and the clear reason that they have failed, to that.
Right. I think there is some connectivity.
These external problems.
Right. Mr. Asif Durrani, India's role generally, but now talking about the future of Afghan peace talks. We talked about India's role in the region, in Afghanistan for that matter, but how do you see the future of intra-Afghan talks? Of course, spoilers are there. India is backing the terrorist organizations, but do you think that this intra-Afghan talks, this peace process would go on? How do you see it?
Well, India is going to continue to play the role of a spoiler. There's no doubt about it. But the overwhelming sentiment, at least at the regional level, is that there should be an intra-Afghan dialogue, and that the parties involved, Afghan parties, Afghan factions involved in the dispute, should strike a deal and bring about peace and stability to the country. So immediate neighbors, i.e. Pakistan, Iran, Russia, and China. So, and Taliban have also approached them, and Mr. Ashraf Ghani's government is also in contact with them. India's role, then India does not fit into that role. So, of course, they would try to play the spoiler's role through some of the Afghan factions who are definitely in league with the Indians. And we should not be surprised at that. But you have to see the majority sentiment, and majority sentiment inside Afghanistan as well as its immediate neighborhood. And more importantly, the Americans, they want to pull out of Afghanistan, and they have made it clear. That's why the tiff between Abdullah Abdullah and Mr. Ashraf Ghani had to be resolved under American pressure, and they had to sign a deal whereby now they are sharing power. And Dr. Abdullah Abdullah is an astute diplomat. He has been a foreign minister. He'll be leading the intra-Afghan dialogue. And now there has been a progress also in the release of our Taliban prisoners. Almost 2,700 Taliban have been released, and the remaining are in the process. So I see in the coming few weeks, I think this process of releasing Taliban prisoners and the Afghan government's prisoners would be complete, and hopefully, I think that by the end of next month, in July, this intra-Afghan dialogue should resume, if not earlier. Yes.
Right. And Ambassador Durrani, recently, a few days back, there was a joint statement by the representatives of Pakistan, China, Russia and Iran, who talked about several points, but the crux was that they're concerned about the spoilers and terrorist organizations using the Afghan soil, that they should not be allowed to use the Afghan soil, and also that these countries support the intra-Afghan talks. What is the regional role in intra-Afghan talks?
Well, this is very much clear. The statement, I'm glad you raised this issue, that these four immediate neighbors of Afghanistan, their joint statement speaks loudly and very clearly that all Afghan factions should sit together, resolve their disputes, and they have also pinpointed by name the terrorist organizations which are active in Afghanistan. And we know for sure that TTP and are being supported by the Indians. They are financing them. They are also financing dissidents from Balochistan, some groups. And so it is, and you can say, a veiled, criticism of India also and its prior role. So, of course, by name you just can't say it in so many words. So, so the sentiment, as I said, is in favor of dialogue, and I think India it would be well advised that they should not spoil it further. Yes.
Right. General Raza, summing up this whole debate, today's dialogue, we talked about Afghanistan, India's spoiler role in Afghanistan. What is the future of intra-Afghan peace talks, and how can we make sure that these talks continue smoothly and spoilers cannot play their role, can spoil the whole situation?
I think the period of November in this year is the kind of deadline that we all should be looking at, and that is the time when there will be elections in the United States, and the present U.S. President would like to tell his voters that he was able to draw a deal, a peace deal in Afghanistan, howsoever imperfect it may be. And therefore, I think from the U.S. side, there will be all-out efforts to make sure that the peace deal and all the various clauses of the peace deal are fulfilled before that time, and some kind of an Understanding comes between the present Afghan rulers and the Taliban. Pakistan has always played a very positive and a major role in that. My opinion is that Pakistan is talking much less to the Taliban directly. I think we need to talk, the Foreign Office needs to talk to the Taliban about issues of our concern, which is the Afghan transit trade, which is the fencing of our border, which is the recognition of the Pak-Afghan border by them, which is about the eventual return of the Afghan refugees, and the misuse of the Afghan consulate by India. So these are the issues which we must start discussing directly or indirectly with the Taliban, because all others, the United States, India and others, they're already doing that. So we need to do that. Coming back to India, I think the remedy of stopping, the violation at the line of control lies only in targeted sanctions by a number of countries like the OIC, which has economic influence on India, and the EU and even the United States has pointed out at targeted sort of sanctions on Indian political and military leaders for their gross human violations and curbing of religious freedom. So once that happens, I think India will be compelled to change its policies.
Right, right. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. General Raza, pleasure having on the show. Thank you for joining us. Ambassador Asif Durrani, thank you for being with us. Pleasure having on the show. We talked about India's role in Afghanistan. Pakistan has been playing its role, that of a peaceful country which wants peace in its neighborhood, specifically in Afghanistan, because Pakistan is directly and indirectly affected by what has been happening in Afghanistan, or what happens in Afghanistan. And we hope that this intra-Afghan talks would continue smoothly. But the most important thing is, as 4 countries recently said, China, Pakistan, Iran, and Russia, that the terrorist organizations should not use Afghanistan soil against the countries in the region, and no terrorist organization should be allowed to operate from Afghanistan. This was the most important thing, and that all the 4 countries support the intra-Afghan talks. The only visible thing in this scenario was India's absence from this platform, because India doesn't have a role in Afghanistan. And if it does, it has a role of a spoiler, because it has been supporting terrorist organizations like TTP and Daesh in Afghanistan to carry out attacks inside Pakistan and other countries as well. Regional countries are very adamant on eliminating these terrorist organizations. And also, the resolve to bring peace and stability in Afghanistan is also strong. And we hope that peace would prevail in Afghanistan. Thank you for watching today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.